You know, every company you've ever worked for or even heard of has this kind of invisible architecture. It's not built with steel and glass, but with rules and roles and relationships. We call it organizational design, and it pretty much dictates how everything gets done, from a tiny task to a massive project. Okay, let's dive into this.
So, have you ever been in that spot? It's got to be one of the most frustrating things at work, right? You're just trying to do your job, but you feel like you're being pulled in two completely different directions. Two bosses, two sets of priorities. It just feels like you can't win.
We'll take this story from an employee named Sue Lee. This is real. She is absolutely stuck. Her main manager, Ted, gives her one set of tasks, but our project manager, Sue Shang, gives her another. Her annual review depends on Ted, but pretty much all of her time is spent on Shu's project. I mean, what a classic workplace nightmare.
But here's the thing. What's so fascinating about Sue's problem is that it's not really about her bosses being difficult. It's not a Ted problem or a Zoo problem. The chaos she's feeling is actually a symptom of the company's blueprint, a specific, intentional, and yeah, sometimes very problematic organizational design.
Okay, so if we're going to think of managers as architects, what's in their toolkit? What are the actual building blocks they use to design how a company works? Well, it turns out there are 6 fundamental elements they can play with. Let's break them down.
The first tool is something called work specialization. And really, the classic example, the one everyone knows, is Henry Ford's assembly line. Instead of one person trying to build a whole car, that massive job was broken down into tiny, repetitive tasks. One person just does the wheels, another just does the doors. The whole idea is to become incredibly efficient.
And this image, this is just a perfect way to see it in action. Making a football is actually pretty complex, but by breaking it down into 13 separate steps, like this person just doing the lacing, companies can use specialization to crank up productivity and make sure every single football is exactly the same.
All right, so you've broken the work down into all these little pieces. Now what? Well, you've got to group them back together somehow, right? That's departmentalization. Do you put all the marketing people in one group? That's grouping by function. Or maybe you put everyone who works on, say, the mass transit sector into one unit. It's all about creating teams that make sense.
And our third tool, chain of command. This gets right back to Sue Lee's problem. It's supposed to be the simple answer to that question, who's my boss? It's that unbroken line of authority, flowing from the CEO all the way down to the frontline worker, making it super clear who you report to.
All right, next up we've got span of control. And this one boils down to a really important question. How many people can one manager actually manage effectively? Is it 4? Is it 8? Maybe even more? And the answer to that has massive implications for how the company is shaped and how much it costs to run. And believe me, the financial impact here can be absolutely staggering. Just look at this number. In an analysis of one company with around 4,000 employees, just by widening the average span of control from 4 people per manager to 8, the company saved $68 million a year. That is a huge amount of money saved just by changing one design element.
Okay, so who gets to make the big decisions? Who calls the shots? That's where centralization and decentralization come in. In a really centralized company, all the key decisions are made way up at the top. But in a decentralized company, that power is pushed down the ladder, so employees who are closer to the customers can make those calls themselves.
And finally, our last tool in the toolkit, formalization. Really, this just means how much a company runs by the book. If you're in a highly formalized place, you've got super detailed job descriptions, rules for everything, and clear procedures you have to follow. But in a low formalization environment, you have a lot more freedom to figure out how to get your work done. So, now that we have our 6 tools, what can we build? Well, architects can combine them to create 2 totally different kinds of blueprints. We call them the mechanistic model and the organic model.
And here they are. On one side, you've got the mechanistic structure. Think of it like a machine, rigid, predictable, tightly controlled. It loves high specialization, a crystal clear chain of command, and lots of rules. But on the other side, you have the organic structure. This is more like a living thing, flexible, adaptive, fluid. It uses teams with people from different departments. Information flows everywhere, and employees are empowered to make decisions.
So that leads to the million-dollar question, right? Which one's better, the machine or the organism? And the answer is neither. Or, well, both. The absolute best design depends completely on the world that the company is living in.
It really boils down to 4 key things. First up, your strategy. Are you trying to be super efficient and cut costs? Go mechanistic. Are you all about constant innovation?
you probably need an organic structure. Size is another big one. Once you get over about 2,000 employees, companies just tend to become more machine-like. Technology matters too. And finally, the environment. Stable, predictable markets are perfect for a machine, but if things are chaotic and uncertain, you better be an organism.
And if you want a perfect cautionary tale for this, look no further than Blockbuster. Man, what a story. Blockbuster was an incredibly efficient machine for renting out physical tapes and DVDs, but when the whole environment shifted to online streaming, its rigid, mechanistic structure just couldn't adapt. The machine was built for one purpose, and when that purpose changed, it broke.
Yeah, the Blockbuster story really drives home why today's business architects are looking for new designs. They're building for a world that's always changing. The future, it seems, has to be flexible. And you know what? This brings us right back to where we started, with poor Sue Lee and her two bosses. It turns out she was working in what's called a matrix structure. This design tries to get the best of both worlds by putting a flexible project-based design on top of a traditional functional one. And the result? Yep, that dual chain of command. Now, even though it can be confusing for employees like Sue, the matrix structure is actually brilliant for certain industries, like construction. Think about it. You need deep expertise from your engineers and your architects, but you also need them all working together seamlessly on one specific project. It's a kind of controlled chaos, but for complex jobs, it really works. And the innovation doesn't stop there. Companies are getting even more creative. You've got team structures, like at Google, where the whole company is basically just a collection of teams. Or project structures, like at design firms like IDEO, where people just move from one cool project to the next. And then there's the virtual organization, like in Hollywood, where you pull together the perfect team for one movie and then everyone disbands.
In this whole push for flexibility, it's not just some business school theory. It is really changing how we all work. I mean, look at this number. The number of people telecommuting grew by a whopping 140% just between 2005 and 2019. That's proof that we're actively breaking down those old, rigid structures.
So all this leaves us with a couple of big questions to think about for our own workplaces. Take a look around at that invisible architecture. Is it built like a machine, designed for perfect efficiency and control? Or is it more like a living thing, built to be flexible and to handle change? And the real kicker is, in the world we're in today, which one does it need to be to actually survive and grow?